Okay, we've looked at a lot of common, and so we're mixing it up here with a little bit of the rare. This is the Leonatus mollissima. Mukasi is the Swahili for it. And this is a plant that I encountered on the northern tip of the island of Pemba in Zanzibar. I hadn't seen it previously, but I recognized it as a wild daga because of the structure of the flowers, and because of the shape of the leaf and the fuzziness of it. And this is known as growing in whorls, W-H-O-R-L-S. In any case, the bees don't care that it comes from Zanzibar. They'll make use of it anyway, and honeybees are particularly fond of these because they've got the short throats, and so the honeybees can get in there. And actually, there was a male hummingbird on it just prior to this instant, but it flew away, and I think it went over to different species. So these plants have their native uses. This one is a smokable euphoric, and it is atypical to the usual species that we see in the US, so we're growing a great deal of it because we were the importers of it and have a responsibility to the plant to continue to work with it and make the seed available to people so that they can continue to diversify their gardens. So it's important to spread useful plants worldwide, and this should be done with faith, not fear. So this is what we call a Thai volcano pepper, because it tends to produce all of its fruits in the center that looks sort of like a cauldron. And what we did this year with this one was, since peppers are perennial, the frutescens species is perennial. Frutescens, you can always tell a frutescens because it has these upright fruits on it. Well, since they're perennial, then we held it in the greenhouse, heated greenhouse over winter, and then we planted it out here after frost as an experiment to see if we could get a bigger plant that way. And it really, really worked. Not only are they healthy, but they're just loaded with fruits. So you'll find at the base here, these are the older flowers, and they're producing the ripe fruits, which are very hot. And of course, peppers are awesome for your circulation, for your heart. They're a herbal first aid for myocardial infarction, heart attack. They'll open up your vascular structure. They enhance the taste of foods. So a bean burrito that's kind of blah, if you slice up some peppers on it and taste it again, then you'll really maybe enjoy the taste of the burrito a little bit more. Meanwhile, you're opening up your vascular structure, and you're sweating a little bit, which is moving toxins out of your body. So the peppers are a really good part of a healthy diet. So here's a temperate tulsi plant right here. This is highly aromatic, and it's really in a nice flowering stage right now. For years we didn't know what this was. We now know that it's Ocimum africanum, and the plants grow best as volunteers. It's one of the few basils that I know that actually drops seed and then self-propagates the next year. So this was grown from a volunteer seedling, and it's right in here in line with the Wayne Kin which is the Baikal skullcap, Scutellaria baicalensis. This particular skullcap is not considered to be a nervine, but instead, unlike the American species, the root is used in traditional Chinese medicine for treating dysentery. So any kind of runaway diarrhea, amoebic dysentery, bacterial overload in the lower digestive tract, this kind of thing is very effectively treated by using the root of this plant. And it has to be years old before you can harvest it. It's very drought tolerant, has these really pretty flowers, and if you come over this way, actually, here's an older plant, and you can see just how very large they do get. This area out here was a wasteland a couple of years back, and we'd let it go fallow, and I had a dream that there was a Baikal skullcap plant out here, and so I came out that morning and I've worked back all the different weed species, and sure enough this plant was just beginning to show, and so then we started to clear out around it, and it became kind of the seed plant for a restitution on this whole area that had gone feral. This is a patch of the Hibiscus sabdorifa, the roselle, and this plant does well in a very hot and dry environment. They are relatively slow growing, and so you need to get an early start with them. But these plants were started in February in the greenhouse, potted up to gallon pots, and then transplanted out early to the field. And up until the time when it started to get hot, they just looked terrible. But now they're doing well, and what you get is you get the flower. Here's the bud, then here's the flower, and then that gives way to the seed pod, which is which has the fleshy calyx, and that fleshy calyx is the part that is used for making tea. That's the basis for red zinger tea, and it's used a lot in South America. People really love the tea. It's stimulating and very tasty and tart, and makes a very awesome red color. So any of these red coloring agents have a tendency to be good medicinal herbs. A lot of the medicinal herbs, like a hawthorn, has those red berries. So that red is often a sign of medicinal activity, and it can also be a sign of toxicity. So you need to make sure that you know what you're working with. But this is the roselle, and we respond to demand, and so there's a lot of demand for hibiscus seed. USDA won't allow hibiscus seeds to come into the country, so it all has to be domestically produced, and it's very clean, correctly identified, and mature, and effective for gardeners when we grow our own. We find that the seeds that we grow on our own farm and clean by hand and really sort properly and store correctly in a cool, dry environment, we find that these seeds are the ones that work best for people. Roselle, awfully pretty. The Leonatus nepetifolia, another wild daga, like the cordal. So this one is much more common. This one you see all throughout East Africa and South Africa. It is the annual species. It's not the perennial daga, but it has these really long-throated inflorescences. So the hummingbirds have just been playing on these constantly, and apparently the honeybees are able to get something out of it too. They may be going through there's one there. Yeah, see, he's getting through the inflorescence and getting to the nectary at the base of the flower. They don't have long enough tongues to go all the way through. It takes a hummingbird to do that. So then again, this is typical to the species. It's growing in whorls. It has these long-throated flowers, and it has the kind of fuzzy leaves that are shaped like that. Roughly triangular leaves. This is the Vedic ashwagandha, Withania somnifera. Somnifera relates to the root word sleepy, so it is somewhat sedative in its activity, and it is at the same time an adaptogen, so it helps you adapt to stress, like any kind of environmental stress, emotional stress, toxicity in the environment. If you work with auto paints a lot, this would be a good herb to take on a daily basis. It's very commonly used in Ayurveda. It is a ditchweed of India. It's very, very typically found in the wild in India. I don't know if you can see down into that root structure, but it is actually the root that's used, not the aerial parts. The aerial parts are full of anti-cancer withanolides, but they're not safe and forgiving for daily usage. Instead, you use the root. And in Ayurvedic practice, actually, they cure the roots in cow urine to make them even less potentially toxic. Because this is in the family Solanaceae, then it has this typical fruiting structure that is the inflated calyx now, isn't it? And you see that in, for instance, goldenberry, which is another plant in the Solanaceae. And when you peel it open, then you get the little fruit in there. And the English, for some odd reason, named this the winter cherry. So that is the reason that they were talking about it as a cherry. It was because the fruit is a little bit cherry-like. But then if you break the fruit, then you get the numerous seeds that are inside. And these we process and dry and distribute by the packet, and people have real good results with them. It's as easy to grow as a tomato plant. In fact, the horticulture on ashwagandha is basically the same as the horticulture on a tomato plant. They're in the same family, and they both are fruit bearing, but in the tomato you use the fruit, in the ashwagandha you use the root. Here we have the wild tulsi. This is the Ocimum gratissimum. This is known as Vonna tulsi in India, and it is also a wayside perennial subshrub in East Africa. So we are growing it here as an annual because it won't take the winters that we have, and this has many of the same uses as a standard tulsi variety. It is more productive, and it's loaded with eugenol, which is the oil of clove that is typical to all the tulsis. So if I smash a leaf and I smell it, I get oil of clove. When I talked to Salim Boom, who was my witch doctor friend in Pemba, I asked him about how these plants are used in local health care. And the first thing he said was mshipa ya watoto, which means that if children have that distended abdomen, then you give them this, and it will help them with their digestion and to develop normally. Artemisia annua, King Hao, the aromatic Artemisia species that is used a lot for treating summer fevers, and is in a lot of demand for treating pandemic influenza. So we're growing a good stand of it here this year, and it is in the early flowering stage. It's in the budding stage right now in midsummer. So the artemisinin content increases as the flowers develop, and so you want to pick it at peak flowering. And it is the late maturing types, which this is the late maturing type, that provide the highest artemisinin content. This was originally promoted by the World Health Organization as an effective treatment for malaria. Malaria is summer fever, so that's consistent with the applications in the Chinese system. Now it's being used more generally, and we're exporting seeds to mainland Africa and also all throughout the United States. People are growing this as a prophylactic against any kind of pandemic illness. Artemisia annua, King Hao. Thistle. This is the Cardus benedictus. Nicus benedictus is I think the current name. It's CNICUS, but the C is silent. So Nicus benedictus, and it's one of the most forgiving of all the thistles. Shakespeare said, hold it to your heart to pacify a qualm. And even if you did hold it to your heart, it wouldn't hurt you, because the spines on this plant are non-irritating and quite forgiving. There's one that's in flower right there. You can see the yellow structure. So this is a great, gentle, digestive bitter, and we get a great deal of demand for the seed of it. If you pick one of these capsules, actually they're known as capitulae, then you can pluck it apart and squeeze it a little bit, and out come the seeds. And the seeds are very characteristic. They have this umbrella-like pappus on them, and they're deeply grooved and greenish, turning darker at maturity. So yeah, you gotta love the seeds. There she is again.
Oh my gosh, that is good.
Right?